Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for making time out of your schedules to come tonight to this Zoom. Thank you to Pauline and to the Garden Club of Old Ottawa South for inviting me, and thank you, Colin, for all your technical support. First, my disclaimers. I'm no master gardener, and nor do I hold vast expertise on native gardening. But I do love my garden, and I'm smitten with native plants and the work of the David Suzuki Butterfly Way project. And I'm a committed learner. I also need to say that my slides come from various sources, including former Butterfly Way Ranger Raywin Hosa, who generously shared her slides with me. My journey to participation in the David Suzuki Butterfly Way project has certainly been a meandering one, with many mistakes along the way. To use a famous quote, I was stumbling towards enlightenment. First, a few words about the David Suzuki project before I tell you about my own trial and errors. It's a citizen-based volunteer initiative to create corridors of native plants in local neighborhoods to feed our region's native pollinators. The bar to participate is very low. They only ask that you add some native plants to your garden, your roof terrace, or your balcony. There's no requirement of removal of other plants or any specific mix or number of native plants. I applied to become a ranger in 2024, and I was accepted that spring. So while I've been on the gardening journey for many years, I've been officially on the Butterfly Way journey for coming up to 3 summers. That'll be 3 summers this summer. I'll return to our Linden Lee Butterfly Way later in my talk. 2 desires have pushed me in the direction of native plant gardening over the years. First, the wish for a beautiful but low-maintenance garden. That's something we all want. And second, the compulsion to do something, anything, to mitigate the disasters that the climate emergency is foisting upon us. This quote from one of poet Mary Oliver's essays captures my sense.
May I be the tiniest nail in the house of the universe, tiny but useful. May I stay forever in the stream. May I look down upon the the windflower and the bull thistle and the coreopsis with the greatest respect.
Thank you, Colin, and sorry everybody for my mess up there.
Don't apologize.
Okay, as we all know, gardens are a work in progress. Some plants are not happy till we've moved them many times, and sometimes they can't be saved, even though it appears that the soil and the light conditions should please them. Other plants take off and overwhelm others and must be wrestled to the ground. When I moved to my home in Linden Lee 19 years ago, I was blessed with several mature trees, a white oak and a maple, as well as some lovely perennials, echinacea, black-eyed Susans, Shasta daisies, a gorgeous peony, hostas, but also these bullies that I have up here on the slides. Buckthorns, goutweed, creeping bellflower, periwinkle, lily of the valley, dog-strangling vine, wild orchid, helleborine sprouting all over my lawn, and of course, dandelions. I added to my garden more peonies and hydrangeas and also scored for free some great saplings that happened to be native. I didn't know that at the time, but they were. From the city, I got a sugar maple and a serviceberry. And from Ecology Ottawa, I got native willows, a birch, white cedar, and spruce. At the same time, I began a big project of gradually removing all the grass from my side lot. My house is on a 1.5 lot. And replanting that grass with shrubs and plants that attracted my eye at local nurseries without realizing I was adding to my problems. I added several types of phragmites, a burning bush, Japanese barberry, gooseneck loosestrife, ditch lily, cushion spurge. The only invasives I didn't add were Japanese knotweed and Queen Anne's lace. And it's a miracle I didn't. I guess they weren't for sale in the nurseries. I bought some native trees like blue beech and witch hazel, not because I knew anything about native trees, but because they happened to be the best fit for the shady part of my yard. I also drove out to Conant Nurseries in Cobden to get my hands on these beauties just because I had to have them. Large yellow lady slipper and pink lady slipper. They continue to sell these every spring, but they run out in about 20 minutes. I also bought several shrubs from Ritchie's sold as native but I'll have more to say about that a bit later. As I added to my garden over the years, I began to notice what was happening in our environment. These slides show the news headlines. By 2019, North America had lost 3 billion birds in 50 years. Many of them are backyard birds. This trend has only worsened since then. The word apocalypse has been used to describe the collapse of insect populations around the world. We have lost 75% of our insects over the last 40 years, and the current loss rate continues at 2% per year. All of us older people recall when insects plastered the windshields of our parents' cars, and grasshoppers, they used to be everywhere. I wanted to include some encouraging news. It's reported by the World Wildlife Fund that eastern monarchs have made a slight recovery as of 2025-2026. This year's 4.42 acre count in occupied forest habitat is nearly twice as large as last year's, but it remains far below what would be considered normal or healthy. In 1996, 1997, there were 45 acres. And in 2018, 2019, 15 acres. So we're down to 4.42 acres as of this current time. And the worst news is that such good reports did not extend to the Western monarch population, which remains far below the long-term average. The 2024 figures fell 59% from 2023, and they report the actual lowest count of monarch butterflies on record. The causes of the massive population declines among native birds and insects are many: urban sprawl and destruction of habitat, pesticide use, widespread use of lawns, which are dead zones for pollinators, leaf removal from our yards and parks in fall and spring, outdoor lighting, salt and chemical runoff, invasive plant dominance, and of course, climate change, warmer seasons, less snow and rain, violent storms that take down weakened trees, invasions by non-native insects. The situation is even more dire for specialist pollinators like the monarch. Monarch caterpillars are 100% reliant upon milkweed for food. The plants also serve as a host for the monarch eggs. So the monarch lives and dies with one specific plant. The good news on that count, though, is that milkweed plants are inexpensive to purchase, they don't require a great deal of space, and they offer, therefore, an accessible way for the general public to help butterflies survive. Even if you have a postage stamp-sized backyard, every little bit counts, says one expert, who stresses that using native milkweed is key. Most of us side readily with the birds and butterflies. We are often keen to contribute however we can to the survival of these beautiful companions in our gardens and in our lives. But insect loss is also disastrous for us. In the context of insect loss, I want to focus for a moment on bees because they are the main pollinators of our native flora in Ontario. Moths, wasps, flies, butterflies all play a role, but bees are the most significant. There are 350 native bee species in Ontario alone. On the left, you'll see the rusty patch bumblebee, and on the right, the honeybee. Contrary to what we may have heard from media, European honeybees are not endangered anywhere in the world. They are not native to North America and are actually managed livestock. They may experience colony collapse disorder, mites, other problems, but they are among the most common species in the world, having been introduced internationally as part of industrial farming. There is currently zero risk of extinction. In fact, the U.S. Department of Agriculture reports a record high of honeybee colonies, up 25% over the last 5 years. The media focus on honeybees has masked the real problem that it's our native bees who are in serious trouble and cannot be recouped if they become extinct. In fact, introduced honeybees pose serious risk to native bees through introduction of disease, competition for foraging, and their pollination of introduced and invasive species. In contrast, the rusty-patched bumblebee used to be widespread and common across North America. It was the first bee to be listed as endangered in Canada in 2012. Author and scientist Sheila Kalla, who passed away just this past July at the very young age of 43, was the last person known to have seen one in 2009 in Ontario more than 15 years ago. North American bumblebee populations fell by 89% in the last 100 years. Most native bees are solitary, ground nesting, do not sting, do not make honey, yet their specific and critical job is to collect and distribute pollens. Some are specialist bees. One type of sweat bee specializes in Monarda fistulosa, which is wild bergamot, and needs that specific pollen for its larvae to develop properly. I've also already mentioned that monarchs are specialist pollinators as butterflies. There are also specialist moths. For example, the evening primrose attracts bats, many native bees, hummingbirds, and 19 species of butterflies and moths, which use this as a host plant for their caterpillars. A particularly notable one is the one in this photo, the primrose flower moth, so named because evening primrose is the only plant that hosts its larvae. Okay, I hate to admit I'm not a super fan of the common evening primrose. It's not my favorite native plant, but I did add it to my garden in the hopes of attracting these gorgeous pink moths. Here I have a live action video. The closed bottle gentian is a plant whose petals never open. So as another example of a specialist pollinator, only the mighty bumblebee is strong enough to wrestle open the petals of the closed bottle gentian to get the pollen. And I love this video because at the very end, you just see this cute little bumblebee bum sticking out of the flower. Zoe Schlanger, former New York Times climate reporter turned plant life super geek, wrote this beautiful book, offering plant science and emerging plant discoveries using accessible prose and sharing her abundant delight. She describes the delicate balance achieved between specialist pollinators and their host plants. And this is a quote from her. The moth that pollinates the flower of a plant in the same species devours the plant's leaves when it is still a caterpillar. It is not then in the plant's interest to completely destroy the grazing caterpillars that will metamorphose into the very creatures it relies on to spread its pollen. But likewise, the plant cannot bear total leaf destruction. Without leaves, the plant can't eat light and it will die. So after a while, the besieged plant, having already lost some limbs and therefore showing tremendous restraint, judiciously begins to fill its leaves with unappetizing chemicals. At least most of the caterpillars will have eaten enough to survive, metamorphose, and pollinate. Everyone in this situation comes within a hair of death to ultimately flourish. What we end up with is a sort of balance in constant motion. From this example, you can readily see how important insects are for pollination. But beyond the pollen transfers that insects perform from plant to plant, helping them reproduce and contributing to a healthy and diverse natural ecosystem, insects also decompose dead matter, they control other pest populations, and they feed many vertebrates, including birds. In fact, 97% of the bird population require insect protein to survive and reproduce, 97%. And the amount of insects they require is staggering. A pair of chickadees must collect an astounding 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise a single brood of chicks. According to Nest Watch, the daily requirement is between 350 and 570 caterpillars, depending on the number of chicks they are raising. The parent's job requires 16 to 18 days of constant feeding from sunrise to sunset. Every 3 minutes, a parent brings a caterpillar. According to Douglas Talamy, therefore, what we plant determines what can live in our yards. In sum, according to biologist and conservationist Edward O. Wilson in 1987, insects are the little things that run the world. As he says here, the truth is we need invertebrates, but they don't need us. If humans were to disappear tomorrow, the world would go on with little change. But if invertebrates were to disappear, he doubts that the human species could last more than a few months. I'll just read on a bit for his explanation of what will happen to us when the insects leave, when the insects are gone. Most of the fishes, birds, amphibians, and mammals would crash to extinction about the same time. Next would go the bulk of the flowering plants, and with them, the physical structure of the majority of the forests and other terrestrial habitats of the world. The earth would rot as dead vegetation piled up and dried out, narrowing and closing the channels of nutrient cycles. Other complex forms of vegetation would die off, and with them, the last remnants of the vertebrates. The remaining fungi, after enjoying a population explosion of stupendous proportions, would also perish. Within a few decades, the world would return to the state of 1 billion years ago, composed primarily of bacteria, algae, and a few other very simple multicellular plants. So I probably don't need to explain to you what the buzz is about native plants, but I will list some of them. For one thing, they are simply gorgeous plants. And as you feast your eyes on these, I will ply you with more facts. Growing native plants is an important response to the decline of birds and pollinators. One headline from 2018 reads, "Backyard bird population in decline due to lack of native plants." A new study from the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute has linked the decline in backyard birds with the abundance of non-native plants. Songbirds depend on insects to feed their young, and insects need native hosts for their caterpillars. Just like the monarch butterfly needs milkweed, all native insects have a native host plant. Planting native plants is also one thing we as individuals can do in response to the climate emergency. These plants play a crucial role in preserving our environment in the face of flood and fire. For example, much of the rapid spread of the Maui fires of 2023 has been attributed to the non-native grasses introduced by colonization in the 1800s that now cover 25% of Maui's land. These non-native grasses dry out earlier in the season and decompose less quickly than native grasses, thereby creating ideal conditions for fire spread. Native plants offer other environmental benefits. Native grasses are ideally suited to the climate they grow in and are usually hardier and more drought resistant. They have deep roots that make them drought resistant, reduce soil erosion and flooding, filter pollutants from groundwater, and increase rainwater infiltration. Native plants also tend to be less susceptible to pests than non-native plants because they've evolved alongside these native insects and they've developed a variety of defenses against them, unlike non-native species. This is just a slide of a few more Ontario birds and butterflies and the plants they enjoy. It's just eye candy here. Well, how do you add native plants successfully to your garden, your rooftop, or your balcony? Well, first we need some terminology to distinguish among types of plants. This is a definition of invasive plants from the Invasive Species Council. Invasive plants are harmful, non-native trees, shrubs, and herbaceous plants that are spread by global trade, human and animal transport, and gardening. In forests, sorry, I got to just move this a bit. Whoops. They can prevent native plants from growing, which can have negative impacts on how ecosystems function, on native vegetation and native wildlife. Many invasive plants can't be used by wildlife for food, which puts pressure on the few native plants that remain to feed all the native insects. Invasive plants also pose threats to agriculture due to their ability to spread quickly, outcompete crop and forest plants, deteriorate soil quality, and they deteriorate soil quality, and they can deteriorate soil quality. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading again because of this thing blocking me. Once they've taken hold, native plants, once they've taken hold, the thick spread of these plants makes them costly and time-consuming to remove. The Ontario Invasive Plant Council lists some of the invasive causing problems in Ontario. In Ontario, it's illegal to import, grow, sell, or trade dog strangling vine, Japanese knotweed, phragmites, and the tree of heaven. But other invasives like buckthorn, goutweed, and periwinkle are still not prohibited and can be sold by nurseries without warnings to gardeners. Some nurseries are at least identifying their invasive character on their tags in response to pressure from native plant gardeners and other environmentalists. Invasive plants and other non-native plants may attract pollinators to feed on their nectars, but they fail to provide the pollens and other resources their larvae require, like some proteins and oils. If you have any doubt about the damage caused by invasives, all you have to do is look out your window on the 417 between here and Montreal, or on the 416 between here and the 401, or if you fly into Newark and you train it to Manhattan, you will see mile upon mile upon mile of these phragmites. They have strangled and will strangle every other living thing in its wake. And it is a nightmare for removal and for reclaiming wetlands. And I planted 8 of these in my garden. These invasives are not inherently evil, everything in its place. In Eurasia, phragmites support 170 species of insects. But after hundreds of years in North America, only somewhere between 2 and 5 insect species can use it as a resource. As a side note, I'd wondered why some of the native plants I purchased for their beauty were not thriving. Interestingly, a book I was reading for pleasure supplied some answers and piqued my interest in learning more about native plants. Robin Kimmerer talks about Indigenous knowledge regarding our environment and the insight she gained when puzzling over the persistent failure of native plants when inserted into environments where invasive species had taken hold. An elder with whom she was in dialogue hypothesized that invasive plants change the soil composition, rendering it inhospitable to native plants. And of course, it's not surprising, these insights have been borne out as well by scientific studies, including this one in 2024. This particular study found that invasive plants have strong cascading effects on regions and ecosystems, and that the below ground traits of invasive plants have largely been overlooked in prior studies, but they found that these roots alter the composition of soil microbe communities. We also find that invasive plant roots are associated with homogeneous microbial communities across the United States with important implications for ecosystem functioning. And this in turn suggests that in some cases, native plants simply can't be accommodated alongside certain invasives. So, defining native plants, the National Wildlife Federation says a plant is native if it's occurred naturally for thousands of years in a region, ecosystem, or habitat without human introduction. These plants have formed symbiotic relationships with native wildlife over thousands of years, meaning that native pollinators are dependent on these particular plants to survive. Some people use the term native plants broadly to refer to any plant native to Canada. And others, like Grant Dobson of Conant Nursery, use the term to refer narrowly to those native plants whose provenance is within 100 kilometers. Generally, however, the understanding of native plants refers to those plants native to Ontario or Eastern Ontario. Native plants are never invasive, although some, like common milkweed, can be aggressive, so you proceed with caution. Unfortunately, nurseries sometimes sell as native plants what are actually nativars, native plants that have been crossbred or hybridized. I mistakenly bought several so-called shrubs, native shrubs from Richie's Feed and Seed. Because I left the tags on them, I was able to discover that I had been misled once I learned more several years later about how to tell whether one is buying a straight native plant or a nativar. Nativars reduce biodiversity because they are cloned, each plant being genetically identical. Native plants, on the other hand, pass traits through reproduction, and thus genetic variations can respond and adapt to stressors like disease or changes in climate. But nativars also offer less nectar and fewer of the nutrients gained from pollens. One study found on average that these modified plants were 50% less attractive to pollinators. But it's not possible to generalize beyond that in the absence of specific study of each specific nativar. But to ensure that you are contributing to plant diversity and the survival of pollinators, you would want to choose straight native species. And here I've got a listing if you want to participate in local research that seeks to answer the questions about what value nativars can offer native pollinators. You can sign up to be part of Mimi Burns' research project. She is a PhD student at the University of Ottawa. This information I found in the January 2026 issue of the Bloom and Buzz, a newsletter provided by the Ottawa Wildflower Seed Library, about which I have a lot to say a little bit later. But in the meantime, if you wanted to participate in this study and if you want to see if your garden is a fit for what she's looking for, you can go to her research site and fill out a survey. So that link is provided here, but also if you get the Bloom and Buzz, you'll find it in the January 2026 issue. And then, of course, there are plants that are non-native but not invasive. I have and enjoy many flowering non-natives in my garden. I have peonies, phlox, hydrangeas, a few roses. However, many non-natives are actually sterile from hybridization, to get bigger, brighter blooms, and cannot even offer nectar, let alone nutrition, to pollinators, causing insects to waste energy seeking food from them. People often tell me they have loads of insects buzzing around their non-native plants. Unfortunately, even if they are finding nectar, it will be junk food for them, empty calories lacking the proteins and nutrients they require. These plants also do not feed the birds what they need. Migrating birds need to bulk up on fall berries for their journey, and overwintering birds also need these berries for survival. Native trees and shrubs provide them with berries that are 50% fat by weight, which is stored by the bird as energy to draw upon. However, introduced shrubs and trees like buckthorn and multiflora rose offer less than 1% fat content. Instead, they are high in sugars that cannot be stored. Native oaks host over 400 species of butterflies and moths in their larval stage, so they are considered what's called a keystone species. But the lovely ginkgo, imported from Asia, supports exactly 0. Similarly, according to Douglas Talamy, the poorly named butterfly bush, a non-native shrub, supports only 1 of North America's 725 butterfly species. One of my neighbors asked me whether our local pollinators can adapt to benefit from non-native or even invasive species. Given that our pollinators and plants have evolved together over thousands of years, and these non-natives have been in our landscape for only a few hundred years, I don't think we have the time to find out. 1,000 years is just too late to recover. Nonetheless, I am aware of one example, and that is the black swallowtail caterpillar, whose native hosts are hop trees and prickly ash. It can also feed on parsley and dill, which some of you may have discovered in your own vegetable gardens. But this is, according to Lorraine Johnson and Sheila Kalla, a rare and exceptional adaptation. Planting a native garden requires a shift in how we see insects. Instead of bemoaning insect activity in our gardens and fighting them off with insecticidal soaps and so on, We can instead see it as our plants doing what they're supposed to do, feeding insects. I do admit to being annoyed when I saw these big bites out of the leaves of the red bud saplings I have been coaxing along. That is until another Butterfly Way ranger congratulated me on attracting leafcutter bees, another significant pollinator bee. It's just a slight shift in attitude, but a very gratifying one. We also need to shift what we understand to be weeds. The British named as weeds many of our extremely important native plants, like butterfly weed, milkweed, thimbleweed, joe pye weed, pickerel weed, fireweed. At the same time, they brought to gardens in North America extremely hazardous invasives like giant hogweed, starting in the early 1900s. I have relied on Lorraine Johnson and Sheila Kalla's beautiful book, which describes native plants, shrubs, and trees, their favored conditions, as well as who each one feeds and hosts to guide me on my learning journey. I've also enjoyed Douglas Talami's New York Times bestseller book, Nature's Best Hope. He proposes a homegrown national park, and it's really a similar idea to the David Suzuki Butterfly Way uh, 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 project. He argues that if all landowners in the US cut their lawns by half and planted just half their lawns with nature in mind, it would comprise 20 million acres of restored land, bigger than the Everglades, Yellowstone, Yosemite, Grand Teton, Canyonlands, Mount Rainier, North Cascades, Badlands, Olympic, Sequoia, the Grand Canyon, Denali, and the Great Smoky Mountains National Park combined. He advises the top 5 things we as individuals can do to contribute to and achieve the homegrown national park or the butterfly way. He says, number 1, remove half your lawn. Number 2, remove the invasives. Number 3, plant natives. 4, avoid use of harmful chemicals. And number 5, plant keystone plants. Here's a quote from Talami. Keystone plants are critical to the food web because they will provide all the necessary components for each stage of the pollinator's life cycle. There are a handful of native keystone plant varieties that are superior performers when it comes to the volume of beneficial insects they can support. These are the plants that form the backbone of the ecosystem in every region. In our region, we need at least one, if not more, keystone tree, shrub, or plant. Um, Oaks, cherries, willows, birches, elms, goldenrods, coneflowers, asters, and plants of the native sunflower family. These are our region's keystone species that you need to consider and try to include if you possibly can in your garden. And I would add number 6 from the David Suzuki Butterfly Way program, keep the leaves. That's because 70% of native bees overwinter in the ground and 30% are in the dead stalks in the wood. To quote Rebecca McMacken, an ecological horticulturalist in her TED Talk, Let Your Garden Grow Wild, she says they're literally called leaves. We should leave them. As I mentioned, I have removed my entire side lawn over the years. I've now hired someone to remove my back lawn, and the same gardener is removing my front lawn and designing a native garden for my front. But I began tackling the invasives, way back in 2022, and I injured my right hand quite severely in trying to fight with the creeping bellflower and losing. Do you know there's a Facebook group dedicated to supporting those who attempt to remove creeping bellflower? I don't advise joining it. It's super depressing. I abandoned the Facebook group and instead in 2024 and 2025 employed 3 local experts to tackle my huge problems of creeping bellflower, periwinkle, lily of the valley, buckthorn, burning bush, and gooseneck loosestrife. I myself removed all the other invasives that I planted, and I've added native plants in the hope they will also assist in fighting off the invasives. So as you prepare to buy native plants for your garden, how do you know if a plant is native? Well, here are some tips. First, shop by the Latin name, not a common name, then you know you're getting the straight species. There should be no special name on the nursery tag. If it says something like Little Miss Sunshine or Dancing Lights, it's a native or a cultivar. If the tag says pest-free or pest-resistant, it's likely a selling feature and there's probably a trademark on the tag. Another resource is to use the VASCAN website. This is the database for the vascular plants of Canada. It is a peer-reviewed collaborative website that you can search by either the common name or the Latin name to find out if the plant is native to Canada, and if so, is it native to your region? So it's a very, very useful resource. The other thing you can do is shop at trusted sources as assessed by the Ottawa Wildflower Seed Library. I want to say a few words of introduction about Ottawa's greatest native plant resource. The Ottawa Wildflower Seed Library is an all-volunteer run organization. It's the first of its kind, founded by rock star Melanie Ouellette in 2020. They provide free access to native seeds. They teach people about gardening responsibly, and then they ask seed recipients to reciprocate the gift of nature by giving back to them to share with other people the seeds from the plants they have grown. They engage in envelope making, seed gathering, envelope filling, seed giveaway events, seed mail out, seedling giveaway, year-round native plant education events, and more. They are an incredible resource. They have an online catalog, they have how-to videos, and they list trusted sources. And by that, what they mean is gardening sources, nurseries, websites whose claim that they're selling you a native plant is verifiable and to be trusted. Here are some of the ones that they recommend. A Cultivated Art, which is very local to me. It's Vanier. It's a woman in Vanier. Conant Nursery is a bit of a drive out in Cobden. Ferguson Tree Nursery, you may have heard of that. Fletcher Wildlife Garden has an annual spring plant sale. And the Worldwide Wildlife Foundation those products are sold by Loblaws, and those are certified as true native plants or simple native plants. So they're a good resource as well. Notice for here, however, that Ritchie Feed and Seed is not on here. That's because they've sold a lot of things as native that are not native. So here's one of my tags. On one side, you can see it says native. On the other side, it says Little Henry, which means it's a nativar. It is a cultivated plant. Here's another tag. This is from Sheridan Nurseries in Toronto. There is both a Latin name and a common name, but if you look up either the Latin or the common name in VASCAN, you will find neither. It is not native to anywhere in Canada. It's native to Northeast Mexico and South Central United States, so it's native somewhere, but it's not native to Canada. So this can be quite tricky. That's why the Ottawa Wildflower Seed Library recommends using trusted sources, so you don't have to do this extra research to figure out, actually, it's not native, even though the tag says it is. This is a tag I also bought at Ritchie's, and this one was, in fact, a straight native species, common buttonbrush. And I went on VASCAN, and here's one of the maps. This is what you get when you search. And the green coloring means here that it is native to, it looks like Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia. So it is a plant or a shrub that is native to us, and it's our region's shrub. So I want to introduce some other helpful websites. In Our Nature has a website that contains many resources. They also sell native plants online. I don't know if they're trusted though. Planting a natural garden is one of their headings, and they list some of the principles that differ from a traditional gardening plan. They say first think in ecoregions, not hardiness zones. Our ecoregion is 5, which is northern forest, zero point 0.2 mixed wood shield, 0.3 Algonquin southern Laurentians. So that's our ecoregion. They say 2, plant communities, not individuals. So choose plants that live together in nature because these are the ones that share habitat and have found the balance of living together peacefully. Number 3, they say stop amending the soil. There's no such thing as poor soil, only poor plant choices. Many native plants prefer dry and poor soil conditions. You take many risks when you impose compost and topsoil to your garden. You risk introducing weed seeds and encouraging weeds in the enriched soil. So they say pick the right plant for your soil. All soil conditions have native plants that enjoy them. Number 4, cover the ground. In nature, we rarely see bare ground. You need to add ground covers that are native, like field pussy toes, Canada anemone, wild strawberry, to guard against erosion and secure the space before the weeds do. Number 5, accept that nature is dynamic and ever evolving. Number 6, learn to love a messy yard. And number 7, the lesson I'd already learned, leaves are made to be eaten. I want to show you a few native plant garden photos just for you to see how different they can look from traditional gardens, yet how gorgeous they can be at the same time. This one has butterfly weed, purple coneflower, wild bergamot, and I think that's common boneset, the white there. This one is wild bergamot, black-eyed Susan, and again, beautiful orange butterfly weed. This one has swamp milkweed, cardinal flower, and purple coneflower. This one has a beautiful stand of Joe Pye weed. It has some June grass, purple love grass, and one of the mountain mints there, and also scarlet bee balm, the red bee balm you can see down there near the purple love grass. A Cultivated Art is another very helpful website run by Sundara Alford Purvis. Her plant library collects the plants according to conditions and companions. She lists meadow, dry meadow, open woodlands, forest, and moisture loving as the 5 main conditions. And she notes that many meadow and dry meadow species prefer sandy, loamy, and poor soils. So there's very little to do to be able to add native plants to those sunny, dry areas of your garden. You don't need to amend the soil. You don't need to do anything. I've got a few slides also. Something else I meant to say. She suggests ensuring several species for each season. So you want to have blooms in spring, summer, and fall so that pollinators are fed throughout. She links for you the plants who are good neighbors with each other on her website. She describes the layers of a native garden: ground covers, understory plants, flowering taller plants, grasses and shrubs, and native trees. She suggests planting at least 3 to 5 plants for each species so that there are enough blooms in a cluster for the pollinators. This is yet another error I've made, often planting only 1 or 2 of a given plant, partly to be sure they will survive before investing. But I think this is a happy error to fix by simply adding more plants every spring and summer. You only need to enrich your soil for forest and moisture-loving plants if your soil is not rich enough. But rather than adding compost, she recommends a season of annual plants that are allowed to compost. Plant compost is far superior to purchased mulch because of all the plant nutrients it contains. Her website also includes a link to a video talk in which she talks you through planning a native garden. It's quite a lovely talk. And now I've got a few slides of some of my favorite and easy to grow native plants, many of which like poor soil. No additional labor required. This is spotted bee balm. It's such an unusual and complex plant. To me, it looks almost prehistoric, but it's so lovely. This is cutleaf or green-headed coneflower. It takes off quickly, grows quite tall even the first summer you have it, and attracts bees for several months of flowering. Then the birds come for the seed heads, so it's a big hit in the garden. The goldfinches in particular love this plant. It's a very busy feeding station if you want to experience instant gratification with native gardening. And here's the plant in action.
Where, yeah, lots of bees on there, Meg. The pollinating convention.
I love that. He calls it a pollinating convention. This is Canada anemone. I've planted this where the creeping bellflower has been removed, and so far it's doing an excellent job of reclaiming the space from the invasive. It's spring flowering with delicate white blooms, and then the foliage is lovely for the rest of the summer. Okay, this is called cardinal flower in the lobelia family. This is not the easiest of native plants. She likes a lot of moisture, but it is a beautiful plant, and it's a plant that will bring hummingbirds to your garden. It was my first summer of successfully nurturing this native plant, and I have my fingers and toes crossed that it will grow again this summer and bring more hummingbirds to my garden. This is a picture of swamp milkweed on University Avenue in Toronto near Princess Margaret and Mount Sinai Hospital, a very, very, very busy downtown roadway. This was last August, all the other garden beds were dying and drying out. The hostas looked terrible. Everything else looked straggly and half dead. But the swamp milkweed was in its glory and complete. I think you can even see a butterfly on this plant. Who knew that you could have that kind of pocket garden on such a busy city street and still attract insects? So I want to mention some of the upcoming events for those of you who are interested in starting to look for and buy or receive native seedlings. The Ottawa Wildflower Seed Library has seedling giveaways starting in the spring. So you would go to their website and you will see a calendar that will tell you their events, and you will see some dates booked for native seedling giveaways. So those are free. You can go and take a little wagon or a bucket and collect some seedlings for your gardens. A cultivated art pickup in Vanier also will be selling seedlings. I think they open in March, their online plant sales. Fletcher Wildlife Garden has a spring sale, so you've got to go to their website and you can order your plants and then go pick them up a few days later when they confirm your order. So they only do this once a year and it's in the spring. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. There's also Ontario Native Plants, which is an online store. They have pre-orders beginning in February, late February. So they sell out of a lot of plants really quickly. So if you know you want things, you want to be on it pretty early. And finally, Conant Nursery will have their plant list available as of the week of February 28th. And they have a beautiful repertoire of native plants. Many are rare, difficult to find elsewhere, and many spring ephemerals. You can only get in touch with them and order from them by their Facebook page. So you have to either join Facebook if you aren't already on Facebook, or ask someone who has a Facebook page to help you order their plants. The one place you should not shop for native plants, of course, is the forest or other wild places. We need all the wild plants that we can keep. But sometimes native plants find you. When you clear out the invasives and the non-native plants, some native plants just show up. Last summer, I was surprised and thrilled to discover these 3 volunteers, which I did not plant. They just came to my garden. Daisy fleabane, figwort, and purple flowering raspberry. I can't wait to see if they reappear this spring or who else shows up. This is part of the dynamic and evolving aspect of a native plant garden. You can also sow your own native seeds and grow your own seedlings. These are instructions here from the David Suzuki Butterfly Way website for winter sowing, for those seeds that require 30, 60, or 90 days of cold, moist stratification. You've got to get them in your pots and get them out in that snow. So me, I've got about 60 pots buried under the snow on my back porch at this point. Or this coming spring, there are some native seeds that can be directly sown in your garden once the soil temperatures warm up. The Ottawa Wildflower Seed Library will be giving away some of these seeds at their spring events if you want to try this route to native gardening. This is my last year's effort at cold, moist stratification. This small amount of labor in January meant I had my own seedlings to share later in the summer with members of our Linden Lee Butterfly Way. I've sown even more this winter. It lifts my spirits to begin gardening in these very cold and sometimes bleak winter months. I've listed here some other resources to assist with either planning a native garden or removing invasives or removing invasive trees and shrubs. There are butterfly rangers for many parts of the city, but you would have to check in with the David Suzuki Butterfly Way project coordinator to see if there's a Butterfly Way ranger in your particular neighborhood. If there is, that's a person who can also provide resources and support for you if you are interested in trying to add native plants to your garden and in joining their Butterfly Way if they have one. Oh, this is just a picture of me with my daughter and my partner in our side garden last summer. Oh, I can't wait for those days of summer. And here I just want to say a few words about my progress with our own Butterfly Way. Initially, I had close to 25 interested neighbors, but I'm now up to 53 members. The most important participant was really the Linden Lee Community Center because they're centrally located, but also offer an important example to the wider community. I communicate with our group by email starting in the spring. I have held several native plant talks, brought speakers in, shared news of upcoming plant sales, and shared free seedlings that I was either able to secure myself or grow myself. And our little Butterfly Way is now on the David Suzuki Butterfly Way map. I end as I started with a quote from Mary Oliver. I hope that by focusing your attention on native plants, your devotion will soon follow. Thank you.